This week in the field, a little trip down memory lane to Windansea Beach. Hey everyone, I'm Scott Davenport. Welcome to In the Field. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going into the archives today and showing some footage here from a photo shoot I did about 6 months ago. This is at Windansea Beach, one of my favorite places to go, and you've seen many different outings from this beach if you've watched my channel for a while. This particular morning was early in my black and white project, which is still ongoing. I think it's going to be a background project probably for the better part of this year. And why I want to share the footage now, I haven't shown it before, is I'm finding it interesting looking at what I was thinking about 6 months ago with this project versus what I'm looking at now. So let me just start by showing you some of the footage from this shoot. Out in La Jolla this morning, I'm going to continue my black and white project and try to find a handful of rocks, not so much these clumps of seaweed, a handful of rocks that are getting some swirls of water around them, nice long exposure, and just smooth everything else out. There's not going to be a particularly wonderful sunrise this morning, just because there's nothing going on in the sky, just the marine layer. But as the waves come in, like this one here, this can fill in all this stuff here, and as it fades away, reveal just a handful of rocks. I think that'll make a pretty nice photo. So now it's just a matter of finding a good spot to set up and get, like I said, 2 or 3 of these rocks isolated. I'm going to focus in on this grouping here, using this foreground rock as the one that won't be covered by water. The others will get all the swirls around it. You can see I'm basically framed up that same way here. If we can get that dialed in, come on. Well, let's get a little closer. We're blowing out too much on the video. But now it's a matter of just waiting for the tide to do its thing here. I am going to throw a filter on. I want to really smooth all this out. I'm going to make the water incredibly smoky and just trying to time it with the different waves. I'm going to start somewhere with maybe a 1 minute exposure. The ocean itself is pretty calm, and 1 minute I'm hoping will be enough to smooth out those waves in the background. And as long as I get enough churn in the foreground, it'll add some of that nice white smoky feel to it. All right, the first shot was pretty good, so here's the result. Now keep in mind it's gonna be a little blown out on the video here. But, getting some nice play around these rocks. They're staying visible long enough so they're maintaining interest. I think I need to adjust my framing a little bit. I'm not too happy with this foreground rock, and I need to have a little more beach in front of it. So we're gonna get that taken care of and then try again. So a challenge here is that as the light is rising, I'm having to remeter the scene continually. Otherwise my exposures get too blown out. Even into like a 2 minute exposure, I'm losing the foreground or I'm losing the background because there's just too much whitewash going on. So once the sun comes up over the horizon there, and it'll start to stabilize out, make the make the capturing of the water a lot easier of a job. All right, I think I finally got one I'm happy with, so pack it up, go have breakfast. I left the shoot with exactly 2 photos. I kept 2 frames, and maybe I captured 7 or 8. I don't remember at this point. It was 6 months ago. And let me show you the ones that I kept in my library. I've got one that I've done no processing on at all right over here. And this one I've done some work on, and I think I reprocessed this very recently, like in the last week or so. And so what I'm finding interesting is how I envision the project at the beginning of it versus where I've gone to since starting it and executing on it. So when I started the project, the idea was very simple, very minimal compositions. A handful of rocks in the ocean, nothing else, very high key, background blown out. And then as the project moved forward, my composition style changed a little bit. I wasn't married to complete long exposures. I would still do some that were in the half-second range or so. Being a little more, I'll say, traditional with a landscape composition. Taking into account the sky, adding in, or taking into account the weather, adding some long exposures to get motion in the sky. So I just found it interesting. I think that was the tip of the week. It's why it prompted me to share the footage and talk about this topic, is having a personal photo project. It gives you a nice meter stick or yardstick to measure things by. what has changed for you as a photographer? What things drew you to a certain subject or a certain idea versus executing on it and seeing where it's led. For me, and the journey's not done either. I'm still doing this project. It will likely last the rest of the year. I have a certain number of locations that I want to capture, and part of it is now waiting for the right weather conditions to take place. So I hope that was somewhat interesting to you, and if it wasn't, well, just be gentle in the comments. If it was, or you've got a project of your own that you're working on, or something that you have that we want to share, a similar experience, I'd love to hear from you. Share that in the comments below, or you can contact me on my website. And as far as for what am I going to do with this stuff for in post on Thursday, I think I'll show you the difference between how I processed the photo 6 months ago versus how I did it now. Not drastically different, but there are notable differences, and I think it's reflected refinement of the processing style. So come back around in the later this week and check that video out. And until next time, my name's Scott Davenport, and happy shooting.